Okay, it is 7:05, we'll call a meeting to order. Start out with a roll call.
Michael Dougherty.
Present.
Ronald Cabana. Fred Shimura.
Here.
Ron,
Yeah.
Ron's here.
David Hosmer.
Here.
Glenn Lessig.
Here.
David Porton.
Here.
David Richardson.
Here.
Lloyd Broderick.
Here.
Jeff Keller.
Here.
Okay, we don't need to see any alternates. The next item is the approve the minutes of the December 8th regular meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to accept the minutes.
Second?
I'll second.
All right, any comments? No comments? Hearing no comments, I will entertain the motion, let's see. We'll take and have a vote on it. All those in favor of approving minutes?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Unbelievable. Good, that's right. I know. Okay, now, the next item is the, under old business, a proclamation of gift for the prior Board of Finance members who are here. And I'm gonna let Glenn Lessig handle that.
Okay. Well,
And please speak up, we have somebody here who forgot to put his hearing aids in.
Okay, well, George, if you could come up, please. We would like to thank you for your many years of service.
thank you very
Maybe
much.
you should refresh, was it 8 years or?
8 years.
8 years, excellent. And so we have a little gift for you and also a certificate of recognition. The certificate of recognition, George and McCoy, on behalf of the residents of the town of Woodstock, the Board of Selectmen wish to thank you for your outstanding and dedicated service on the Board of Finance, November 20, 2007 through November 17, 2015 as a full member. So, thank you.
It was a pleasure serving with all of you. And thank you for putting up with the bad jokes.
And you have the other one?
Is Mark here?
Yes, it is.
Oh, look at that.
Sorry, Mark. I can see you over there. Okay, Mark, we have a recognition for you also, and I'd like to read it. It's Certificate of Recognition, Mark E. Chamber. On behalf of the residents of the town of Woodstock, the Board of Selectmen wish to thank you for your outstanding and dedicated service on the Board of Finance, January 14, 2014 through November 3rd, 2015 as an alternate member. So, on behalf of the Board of Finance, thank you very much. We miss you.
Okay, next order is the stipend correspondence. I believe you all have a copy of what has been received on the stipend correspondence. Any comments? Yes, Mr. Richards. Please make it.
I will try to make them as short as possible, but I'm afraid I got some information for you. It might take a minute to explain. Number one, the last opinion we got from the town attorney was a draft opinion. We really should get a signed opinion on the stipend issue. The draft opinion leaves it open that if there's something that ends up turning out of way, the attorney can basically say, it was just a draft copy.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
we really should have a signed copy so that he owns it.
well, I would suggest that we take and submit to the attorney the written opinions from the brokers, and that should take care of it.
Well, that might take a minute. The one from the first selectman, I don't have any issue with the first part of her opinion, which was basically, she says that the stipends are not in violation of any ACA or DOL regulations. That's her opinion, and I'll come back to that in a minute. The second part, can you provide a firm dollar figure on how much the health insurance cost would be for an individual? Frankly, her response is beyond pathetic. She says no, and then every word after that is just obfuscation, because it has nothing to do with the rate for an individual. She talks about the complexities of multi-person policies, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the fact is that for the 8 people who participate, who are either employee plus one or a family, we have a rate. It may be an amalgam, because that's what the stipend is based on. And I covered that in the email that I sent around. So for her to say that they can't come up with a rate is absolutely ridiculous. I showed you one yesterday in about 30 minutes. I looked at 5 other programs across 2 different insurance companies that do it without any problem. And in fact, when you compute the actual stipend based on those, it's within $22 for all of them. That's how close they are. The basis for an individual, and compared to the basis for employee plus one or a family, is a risk issue. And all of the insurance companies face basically the same risk issue. So it should not be a problem getting an individual rate. Having said that, the second letter that went to the BOE gets more interesting. The letter that was sent actually asked the wrong question. The question that was supposed to have been posed was whether or not the stipends for the town hall employees were a violation. Dan, however, thankfully, actually answered both questions. And I didn't realize this till this afternoon when I read it for about the 3rd time, that it finally dawned on me what he was saying. In the first part of his letter, he says, the stipend issue for the Board of Education is not a problem. And it's not a problem, because they pay $1,000 or $2,000. And that's not an issue. And I'll explain why that's not an issue in a minute. Well, you'll get the idea. He then goes on to talk about, for the purposes of speculation and for your internal reference, locked-in compliance unit has published the following summary and guidance/opinion. And when you first read this, it kind of sounds like an IRS tax kind of issue. It's not. What it references is the cash out option incentives and what the IRS considers in terms of what the cost to the employee is for the insurance. The example they give in here is if an employee contribution is $200 a month and the employer offers a $100 opt-out credit, the person who takes the coverage is spending $200 and foregoing an extra $100. So the actual cost of coverage is $300. And we sort of talked about this a few times, because we talked about the employee, the 2 people who work for the town hall, both have the same job, both get roughly the same salary. One gets the stipend, they make 16 grand more than the one that doesn't. the IRS is doing is saying, if you're offering cash to opt out, that's an opportunity loss for the employee who has to take the insurance. When you apply that to our situation, we offer a stipend of $1,163 this year per month. The average employee who's participating is paying around $200 to $240. I think it's $50 or $60 a week for their contribution. That means the cost to the employee is between $1,363 and $1,403. That's what they have to pay, and that's the money that they don't get by not being able to take the stipend, which is what Dan is outlining in this. That means that the cost for an employee who takes the insurance by the IRS regulation on an annual basis is between $16,356 and $16,386. The Affordable Care Act requires that the cost to the employee be less than 9.5% of their income. That's their upper limit. For that to be the case for our employees, the household income for every one of the employees in the town hall would have to exceed $172,000 a year. Otherwise, the cost of the insurance exceeds the ACA allowable. Now, frankly, I must have looked at this 100 times, and I never even envisioned this as an approach to the thing. Because even when I first talked with Dan, which was almost a year ago, all he said to me was, when I got to talking about stipends, is he says, we can't talk about that, it's ACA ERISA violation. He didn't say anything more about it. Until I read this, I had no clue what he was talking about. And very clearly, our attorney had no clue about this either. It's just sort of it's a completely different direction on this thing. I mean, I kept looking for something that said, the ACA Act said, this is limited, or that's limited. I never thought about it from the aspect of, it limits the cost, and it counts the foregone expense for the employees who don't get the stipend. Now, it makes a lot of sense in terms of fairness, but it sure isn't intuitively obvious. And what that really means is, if this is correct, and if there is no exemption because we're a town and not a business or a charity or virtually anything else, we're in violation of the ACA. And we've been that way since the beginning of 2015. Now, the IRS has waived any penalties between January 1 and July 1. But technically, we could be liable for penalties since the 1st of July. There are exceptions. It may not apply if the failure to not discover when exercising reasonable diligence, or if it is due to reasonable cause and is corrected within 30 days after the entity knew or in exercising reasonable diligence should have known that the failure existed. We've certainly done a lot of work trying to figure this out. But I never thought of that. So I think we have a problem. We have to determine whether or not this applies to us.
And
If
the
it
question
does,
question
we gotta
also
fix it.
is, how does this stipend go along with the contracts we have with the employees?
Well,
And then that means we can be, as far as I'm concerned, or my thinking is that we would have to correct this at the next contract negotiations. And, there's really not a whole lot we can do, until then, unless we take it or open up the contract negotiations again.
that's not true. And just frame of reference. I've got about 30 years' experience in labor management and contract management. Labor contract management, and I've negotiated a lot of contracts. This contract, the only part of the contract that would be affected is section 15.2. It's the specific clause that addresses that. And there is a separation clause in the agreement, so that if any one part of the contract runs into legal problems, it doesn't affect anything else in the contract. You can just deal with the one piece of it. So that is doable. But before you can even approach that, you gotta make sure that this applies to us. I mean, it seems pretty straightforward that it does, unless there's a government exception, which is possible. Not that, if you keep following this through, we shouldn't be paying any more than about $1,000 a year for a stipend, which I think most of us would say is reasonable anyway. But at $1,000 a year, together with what the employees are paying, that keeps us at a point where even for the lowest paid town hall employee, we don't exceed the 9.5% limit, which is, for somebody making $40,000 a year would be $3,800. The most anybody contributes now is about $2,900. Does that sound about right?
You say sounds right to me.
Well, it's it's $60 a week, $60.15 or something. So, it would be around $3,000. So if that's all correct, and this is all correct, we should be paying about $1,000 a year for the town hall employees. Now, the reason that there's no issue with the BOE is very simple. They have two tiers. They have a $2,000 tier and a $1,000 tier. The $2,000 tier applies to the teachers. I don't know what their weekly contribution is, but my guess is it's not high enough when combined with the $2,000 if they exceed 9.5% of the salaries for teachers. For the others, like the janitors or whoever, who probably earn less, they get a $1,000 stipend. And again, as long as they make it more than about $19,000 a year, which I'm guessing is pretty much the bottom of the pay scale for full-time employees, then they don't have a problem. So that's why Dan said, yeah, there's no problem for the BOE. If there was, he would have brought it up with the BOE a long time ago.
Since there is no problem with BOE, we could forget about them now and just take and address the one for the Board of Selectmen. Okay, my suggestion, in case anybody else wants to add something to it, would be to take all of this information that we have generated so far and take us, send a letter to the Board of Selectmen and tell them to, work with the town attorney and correct it. Because that is their.
I don't disagree with you, but I will point out, they gotta do it fairly expeditiously, because if this is correct, we're racking up $1,500 a day in potential penalties or excise tax.
Well, that's no problem, because the Board of, the First Selectman works every single day. We don't work every single day, we work one day a month.
No, I'm saying this for emphasis, because there isn't a lot of time to spend 6 more months playing with the attorney while he decides which end is up.
Right, I agree.
Because if we do this within 30 days, and correct it, whatever that means, there's no penalty. If we fool around long enough, I mean, we technically could have racked up as much as $300,000.
Okay, does anyone else on the board have any questions on this or comments on it?
Mr. Chairman, I've been there and I've done this. I agree that the amounts we're paying for a stipend are probably higher than they should be. Because I had 165 employees and the premiums were based on age. So I think if we looked at every employee who was getting a stipend, I could calculate to the penny how much it would cost me to put them in for a given period. And I think it's higher than the family thing. That's, no question, I think we're being paid too much. There is a disconnect, however, between the ACA. We went through this last year and this year with our firm. And the ACA just has limits as to how much you can charge an employee. It's 9.5%. If I want to bonus that employee and give them more money, I'm not charging them for insurance. I'm giving them money. And that's not going to trigger an ACA violation because we're not forcing them to pay for more than 9.5%. The fact that we have a faulty calculation that gives them a cash benefit doesn't equate to a violation of the ACA, and I don't see any liability to the towns. The last thing I'm going to mention is, I was in my younger days, a council president with ASME, our municipal department. I was president, and we did this all the time. And we would complain, and we would seek labor board actions for any changes to the contract that were thought to happen during the pendency of the contract. We had 2 years for your contracts. So I think the barn door is open and the horse is out. This is something that is going to be addressed when the next contract comes up. Because it's something known as past precedent. That's a very, very strong indication of the way that things were supposed to be. And the change to past precedent can translate to an unfair labor practice or prohibited practice. And by the time, even if it isn't, and here this guy did a real good job in mentioning past practice, and he also brought up the gender issue. All of the people are female. By the time you're done with this at the State Labor Board, you're going to spend more than you could theoretically save by a change in the contribution. So in my humble opinion, we're stuck with this calculation until the next time we come around to negotiate a contract. And I think it falls on the selectmen to deal with this. But they did. A contract was signed. If I was an AFSCME member, I would scream that you're changing this based on past precedent. And it has nothing to do with the ACA or anything else. And by the time we were done, even if we were right, it would cost the town more. Well, that's my 2 cents, and I think it's a selectmen's problem.
Okay, anyone else?
I was thinking of it the same way you were until I read this. See, the problem isn't,
This to me is a selectman's problem. Let them handle it.
well, we gotta understand what the issue is if it's gonna be explained to the selectmen. And the problem is not what we pay to the people who get the stipend. The people who get the stipend is not an issue. The problem is, we tell the employees, you can take the insurance or you can take the stipend. What the IRS has decided, and this is all in the last year and a half, is that if you forego the stipend or the cash opt-out, that is part of your cost. So for the employee who is getting the insurance, they not only pay the $200 a month that's coming out of their paycheck, but they're not getting the $1,100. The IRS has decided that the $1,100 is part of the cost of the employee. That's what Dan is pointing out in this thing. And I had to read it like 3 times before it dawned on me what the heck he was saying. It's a backdoor
So
kind
who
of
do you
issue.
want to fight with, the IRS or the State Labor Board?
Well, what you don't want to fight with, not a state labor board, that's the total malarkey. If the contract is in violation of a statute, then that part of the contract is null and void. So you don't end up with the state labor board.
That's why I said we get all this stuff together, give it to the selectmen, direct the selectmen, and get word the town attorney, and solve it. That's what they're being paid for.
That's fine by me, and you ought to send a bouquet to Dan Hebert for pointing this out to us.
Yeah?
Because the question he was asked, he could have stopped right at the top of that page. He gave us the rest of that page.
Okay.
And if he hadn't given it to us, we wouldn't have figured it out.
How about,
Anybody else have any questions?
to follow up on what you're saying, Mr. Chairman, what if we ask Mr. Richardson to help draft a letter from the Board of Finance to the Board of Selectmen, and he can raise his points, be very specific about how he's interpreting what the insurance consultant told us, and bring it to their attention very specifically.
It's fine, it's fine with me.
So let's compose a motion.
Pardon?
I think we need a motion.
Compose a motion.
Yeah, we should.
Or perhaps two.
Well, we need at least one.
Yep. So how do we want to word it, Glenn?
To move to ask David Richardson to draft a letter to be sent by the board chairman to the Board of Selectmen, identifying our specific concerns regarding the ACA potential violations.
I would second that.
Okay, now the next, okay, any discussion on that? What I would like to know is, when the letter is drafted, should the board get together to take and review it before we send it, so that everybody else would have, approval or denial of it?
When is our next meeting?
Our next meeting is in March. I don't think that, we should wait that long. Okay, so, once we, yeah, just one February. Once the letter is drafted, is there any problem with, taking and sending a draft to each member that they can take and mark up and return to me? Is there any problem with that as far as,
Our new email policy?
do we have this, have it started yet?
Is that-
I
is that everyone?
I don't,
Yeah, is that gonna be FOI?
I think the only issue becomes a deliberation,
Yeah.
then it's an issue.
Okay. So is that the way we want to handle it?
Is there any reason why we just couldn't schedule a special meeting for this one issue? Get everybody in one spot?
You know, honestly, guys, the most straightforward thing is to sit down with the first selectman, on the phone with the town attorney, explain the situation, and basically tell them to make a determination. If they can find an exemption, fine. If they can't, then they gotta figure out what to do. It's not really much more involved than that. And it's like a whole lot quicker.
Well, I want
And I can do
a
that.
paper trail. I want a paper trail.
Okay, I can send something to everybody, and if anybody's got any comment, they can send it back to you.
Yeah, okay.
To do that way?
Does everybody want to do it that way? Fred, you have any questions or comments on it?
That's fine.
Okay, well, legal?
Yeah,
Okay.
as long as they're just sending them to you and you make the final letter.
Okay.
It's your signature, you were it.
Yeah, I own it. Okay, no comments, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so moved. Now, what's the latest?
Christine's all set with that motion?
You want me to read it back? To draft a letter, well, David Richardson to draft a letter to be sent by the board chairman to the Board of Selectmen in regards to the Board of Finance's concerns about possible ACA violations.
Karen, could you send me that email from Dan Hebert by email? So I can attach it when I've got it all marked up.
Okay, let's move on to the update on the bylaws.
We don't have anything to report. Dave and I are setting a meeting date this evening. We should have a report. Would like, I think we should change that to update on policy manual and not bylaws. I would agree. I don't want to overstate that.
Okay, so we want to change that to update pilot, policy statements?
Policy manual.
Policy manual, okay. That, to me, is much better rather than, because I do not think we need bylaws. And I think bylaws,
I think everybody's on the same page with that.
yeah, because to me, bylaws are just a bunch of regulations for us to violate. Well, it's true. Okay, next one is fund balance policy. We were talking about that last meeting. And let's see, I have a policy statement someplace. Fund balance policy. Okay. Don, you want to talk about the increase that you were suggesting on the,
Well, you're currently at 13%, your policy. Our financial statements reflect 13.2%, which is about $36,771 that's available. With what's going on in the state, and we're not sure what kind of funds are gonna filter our way, you may wanna consider upping your fund balance policy or keeping it the same. But I would recommend not spending it.
recommend not spending what?
Your money that you have, the extra $36,771. I would recommend upping your goal.
Okay, to what?
That's up to you.
That's up to what? So you don't have any suggestions?
No, I think that you guys will come to the right figure.
Okay. Yes, Fred?
I think the auditor talked about 15, when they were here, about 15%,
Yeah.
was the number I seem to recall from their recommendation.
It was 11 and 15, I believe,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we're at 13.
right.
Well, our limit's at 13.
And I think when we had that Q&A with her, I think she said she
Recommend about 15%.
15%.
Yeah. But we should, if we all agree, we should adopt that figure as the policy. Any other,
Yeah, no comments.
any other comments? Go ahead.
Well, I have a different opinion on it. I think that we should take the 36,771
Yeah.
and add it to the uncommitted or unassigned fund balance, capital non-reoccurring. And then we can make that available to the Board of Education or the town government side, the Board of Selectmen, to do some capital projects in town. We could actually even treat it as a rotating fund. When they request the funds, that they reimburse it with either their transfers at the year end or from the non-lapsing policy. So, for example, if they're currently, the balance of the non-lapsing policy wouldn't allow them to do some painting during the spring vacation time, and they wanted to get that done, and they were able to get that done, they could come in and request that money, and we could make it contingent on them reimbursing us later out of their non-lapsing fund at the end of the year. We can put that money to work for us, and then instead of just throwing it in the closet on top of the pile of all the rest of it. We don't have a lot of infrastructure in this town, we don't have a lot of debt. And then we're right in the middle of the recommendations from the auditors as to how much money we should have on hand. And one final thing, our fund balance policy actually talks about amending the policy takes place in December or July. It's page 3 at the bottom and italics. Doesn't mention that we can amend the policy in June. If we wanted to amend it in July, it would meet the existing policy.
But it also does not preclude in January.
I guess you could make that argument, but it says subject to review on a biennial basis in the months of June and December.
Correct. In this case, we did not get the auditor's report, so we could take care of it in December.
I hear you,
And-
I hear you,
and
I'm just reading what
I
it
know,
said.
but like I say,
You know, so, you know, the other option
well,
is,
one of the reasons why it's June is right after the budget has been passed, okay? Whatever anybody wants. I'm listening to, open for comments.
like I said, I'd like to see us start getting some of this capital non-reoccurring things done at, you know, at the school, and, you know, there are things on the selectmen's capital plan as well we can be working on. Instead of waiting every year till the end of the year and see how much we transfer out and move that into the capital line, we've got this money to be putting it to work.
How much is in that fund right now?
The, CNR uncommitted,
Yeah.
71,903.
Yeah.
So this would push it over 100.
Mm-hmm.
What was it again,
Well,
71?
71,903.
Yeah, it's right here, Ron.
I don't have my reading glasses.
Is there any other comments?
That's what I'm waiting to hear, any other comments? Now, I do believe that one of the reasons for this is to take and cover at least 1 month's expenditures.
We have about, we have 1.6, which isn't very much. I mean, most households try to have more than that in the bank to cover an unforeseen event.
That's correct.
So that's where we're teetering.
Whereas if you had it in capital non-recurring, you couldn't touch it for that.
Well, if
Unless
it's
you went to a
voted.
town meeting and.
Right, exactly, but if it's uncommitted, then you have the right to move it back. But once it's committed, it's been
Right.
committed by town meeting.
So it's still at our disposal in the event of an emergency. Plus, I'm assuming that if the budget was to be shot down, for example, there's contingency plans as to what would take place. It wouldn't necessarily just be business as usual. I would assume that. I don't know that to be true.
Well, if it exceeded 2 months, then I'd have to go to the bank and get banned short-term loans to
Right.
keep the town floating, because we have restricted assets I can't touch.
Okay.
But the other towns have run into this problem where they've had to go like 14 times to get a budget passed. Don't they just send out tax notices based on the
Yeah.
existing mill rate?
Right, the statute allows the selectmen to set a rate based on the prior year budget, and then you adjust it on the second payment if it's more or less.
Yeah,
It's a pain, but
Yeah, which
you're
makes,
not gonna run out of money.
which makes it more
I'm not
expensive
gonna
on
shut
the town
down
to do that.
and go home.
Makes it more expensive on the town to do that, that they can probably change the second notice and publish it and send it
Yeah,
out.
it does cost you, cost the town some administrative money, reissuing bills, et cetera, so there is some expense in that.
Yep.
But the point is, you're not gonna shut down if you don't have a budget passed by mid-July or August first.
So, what do you wanna do?
Well, I'll make a motion and you can always shoot it down. I move that we move the $36,771 into the capital non-reoccurring fund.
Yeah, but that doesn't address the upper limit, which is what we're talking about tonight, is the upper limit.
And we're talking about both.
Mr. Chair, I second the motion, so the purpose of discussion.
Okay. Any more comments?
I agree, Dave, it doesn't address the issue, but the issue doesn't need to be addressed personally. I mean, we set it amount, we don't have to change it every time we bump it or go above it. And if If it was 13% was good enough a year ago, you know, maybe we can rethink it another year or so to increase it, but we've got a policy in place. Why, I don't see why we should all of a sudden say, oh geez, we're gonna bump it, so let's change the policy so we don't have to comply with the policy.
We could in fact change the policy in June too,
Okay.
if we felt stronger. We're right smack in the middle of the recommendations.
The 39,000 isn't gonna make a whole lot of difference one way or the other.
Right.
And we got a policy that says 13%, if we exceed it, which we have, gives us three options. Dave has chosen option number 2. I don't have a problem with it.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? So move. Now we'll go on to new business. FEMA fund reimbursement on the Board of Education. That is, the Board of Ed got some money reimbursed to them for snow plowing. And let's see, that was the amount of $2737.50. And they would like to take and put that in CNR for technology improvements in the 5-year capital plan. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, comments? Now, Victor, would you like to address that and let us know?
Yes, you have the FEMA reimbursement for that big storm last year. Our portion of that was $2737.50, as you said. And we would like to take that money and put it towards projectors to replace 3 smart board projectors, and it's part of our 5-year capital plan as far as technology. So if you'd be so kind, it would just go right towards instructional support in the school.
Okay, any questions?
I have comments, no questions.
Or comments, whatever.
This is actually 2 requests, right? One is to place it into the town's capital non-reoccurring account. And then the second one is a request to allocate them to the education, Board of Education technology purposes. Correct?
Correct.
So the motion right now is to move in the capital non-recurring
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
only.
Yes.
well, no, it's for both.
No, I think that's 2 separate
It's gotta
motions.
be.
Yeah, separate motions, okay.
So do you want, so my comment's actually about the second part. Want me to go ahead?
The question on the
First one out of the way first.
Well, that's why I'm asking.
Question on the first one, that FEMA money is where now? I've just thought of what
In
it
the
is.
general fund.
Just in the general fund, so that's not a problem to transfer it?
As long as I have your permission to do it.
Well, I feel it should go to them because I already spent the money.
Right.
It's just being reimbursed.
Yeah, I don't know, problem. I just
Okay. Now,
want to know where the money sat.
yeah, it's in limbo. Okay, any other comments? Okay, on the first part of that, all those in favor of, taking that reimbursement money and put it in, capital non-recurring?
All right,
Aye.
Opposed?
I
Okay.
believe that was supposed to be non-lapsing.
Non-lapsing account, excuse me.
No, it's in
No,
our.
Capital non-recurring. That was the motion.
yeah.
Okay. So now what the second part?
Okay, I didn't get the, I didn't get who seconded that motion, Glenn.
I did.
Brett, okay.
The request is sitting on the Board of, Woodstock Board of Education. Request for the, restricts the, Board of Finance place the funds that they're receiving for, reimbursement for the, from FEMA into the town capital non-recurring account. It doesn't say anything about a non-lapsing account in here. So it goes into the non-capital non-recurring account.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so who was talking about non-lapsing?
I had mentioned it.
Oh, okay. All right, so so it's been approved, so then we need a second one?
Yeah, because the second request is
For the expenditure.
for the expenditure that they're gonna use for technology. And I have a comment on that,
Okay. Who's gonna make the motion?
I will make the motion to approve spending $2,737 from the town's capital non-recurring account, or to allocate that amount of money from the town's capital non-recurring account to the Woodstock Board of Education.
Is there a second?
well, I'll second it to give it to discussion.
Okay, I've got a problem with that. My problem is that the Board of Finance cannot tell the Board of Education how to spend their money. And that is in fact what you're doing, tell them how to spend the money.
I didn't say technology.
He did not. He did not specifically say what the use was for.
Technically, this particular thing is a capital expenditure and doesn't fall under the same regulations as 10 account. And the reference to not telling them is 10-222. This doesn't fall under that. This would be separate. So you could tell them they can only spend it on, and that's perfectly fine. You can't tell them that they can take their expense budget and spend it here or there or the other place, because that's 10-222.
Any other discussion?
Yes, recently, probably a meeting ago, 2 meetings ago, when it comes up periodically, that we don't allocate money the same night that it's requested as a policy. We've said that over and over and over again. That way we can go home, think about it. In fact, it was probably on a recording from the last meeting. So, I would suggest that we don't violate our policy even though it's not in writing. And we can put this on the agenda for the next meeting.
It doesn't really seem like the spirit of the policy. I mean, that's when we're making a decision to spend money on some item that's presented to us. This is this is money that they spent out of their budget last year. They got the money back from FEMA, now they just want to be able to spend it again. It's not like we are taking it out of our general funds. That's money that came in for the Board of Ed from FEMA. We're just approving that, yes, that it passes through our account correctly. This seems like, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but it seems like we're,
That's something we're gonna have to have some deep discussion on in policy.
Also,
we're
when that,
parsing that, you know.
when that policy was come up, there have been several occasions where the Board of Ed or someone would come in that night completely unannounced with absolutely no paperwork in our packets about them wanting to spend some money. And they have to have it right now, okay, that's what they say. However, they might have gotten it right then, but they didn't spend it for the rest of the year, okay? That's why I say that they had to be presented to us so we could think about it. They were all general big ticket items. That was the basis for that policy, okay? Whereas this one here, we've had the information well in advance. And it is money that they had already spent, and they're getting reimbursed by the government for what they had spent, or part of what they had spent. So, any other questions, comments?
I have a tendency to agree with that, exactly the way both you and Glenn stated it. It's money that was already spent.
Yep.
And it's a windfall that they got the reimbursement. And I think that it should be given to them. And I think that we should be able to vote on that tonight, because we have already made the vote to make the transfer. And so, the way I'm looking at it, we've already given it back to them.
Yep.
And they spent it originally, so if they have the good purpose for its use, then we should give them our blessing.
Any other comments? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? So moved.
Well, maybe comment, maybe Glenn and Dave could take a look at that policy before they come up with a whole manual, the whole meeting. You know, there might
Fine
be-
tune that one.
Yeah, maybe, if now it has to be a whole month, a lesser amount, 325,000, as long as we get it, say, 10 days before, or with the packet or something, a week before, so, and small amounts of money, to be held for a whole month. doesn't make a lot of sense.
I think we're gonna need some guidance.
One of the things you may use is, this was a reimbursement. If this was a reimbursement of an expense that was covered by insurance, for example, or let's say a student loses some books and they get money for it, that falls outside of all the other regulations. Specifically 10-22, that's one of the exceptions. So you can kind of do something like that, but you know, where it's a reimbursement and a reallocation of a reimbursement, that's not like a big deal. It's gonna typically be stuff like this, it's not $100,000.
All right, next item was on the non-lapsing update request. We had this through the second.
Yeah. You got it right here.
6B. 6B.
I think that one we go.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, we all have this. Here's a motion. And we can discuss it. Anyone wants to make a motion to,
Remove, for the
okay,
additional expenditure of $3,340.65 from the non-lapsing account. of the Board of Education.
okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, discussion. Victor?
With the recent repair and renovation to the middle school parking lot, as the highway department was working there, they found the subsoil to basically do the consistency of pudding. So they thought it would be best to replace that soil with something firmer and more supportive. So the cost of those materials was an additional $3,340.65. So what we're doing is asking you for the approval
To pay the bill.
that's right.
Okay.
Pay the bill. So they don't take my parking lot away.
Okay. Any discussion? No discussion? Well, it's a done deal, you can't take it out now. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? So moved. Okay, now let's go down to, current year budget projections. Once again, Mr. Coates.
As you can see, our estimated deficit right now is at $75,235.91, primarily in relating to special education costs. We also do have some additional costs in our substitute account due to extended illnesses. So you see a balance there between the certified staff account and the substitute account. So there's a trade-off there. But primarily it's due to special education costs. And we are realizing some savings in our fuel account. As you've noticed, diesel and heating oil has dropped considerably, so we are getting some savings there. So that's where we are right now. It's still early. We're hoping for things to level off, but I just want to keep you updated.
Okay. Now, I know in the past, the discretionary spending that you have very little of, gets frozen early in the year. And, could you let us know which items, in your budget are not gonna be funded?
Well, right now we
Since you
have.
can cover the
Right,
shortage.
we basically have a freeze across the district except for essential items and salaries and things like that. So we're basically holding the line on everything to make sure that we can cover our bases.
Okay. Well, I'm just curious, so that comes the end of the year, if there is any money left over, from, some of these shortages, that, we'll have an idea on, how the money is expended in the last month or the last couple of months of the year.
Sure, because we may be holding back, say, on student supplies and things like that. So, our hope would be at the end of the year, like we did last year, we would reinstate and purchase some of the things so that we have a head start in the following year.
Okay.
I had a couple
Yep.
questions. Two things. One, the healthcare budget seems to be in pretty good shape
Yes,
through
it does.
December.
It does.
I mean, like, pretty good shape.
We
Couple
are
hundred
holding
grand.
our own, yeah.
Yeah,
We've been very
So-
lucky.
but that can turn in an instant. The other thing is, on this list, you have tuition revenue, $4,647.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that $4,647, you can't spend. This is what I pointed out last year. That is a violation of 10-222. You can only spend, or whatever the number was, I'm making it up, $16,492,000. You can't spend 16 million, whatever I said, $492,467. So you can't count that as added revenue.
That's not what we've been told by our attorney, that the tuition revenue is part of our privilege to spend, so.
Yeah, the problem is you can't spend it against the 10 account, because the 10 account is limited by 10-222, except for two exceptions. One is state and federal grants, and the other one was the one I mentioned earlier, which is if you had a reimbursement for an insurance claim or lost something where you get reimbursed, that specifically is excluded from the limits under 10-222. This isn't. You're just gonna run into the problem, and hopefully it doesn't become a problem, but your attorney better go get your stuff checked.
Well, our attorney, I mean, when I asked this question, because you had asked me directly, when I checked with Shipman and Goodwin, they did indicate that those special revenue accounts can be used, and they're not a violation, we can use them and expend them towards our budget, so.
Well, they need to explain how you can expend more money than is authorized, because 10-222 is about as explicit as it can be. You can spend only what was authorized, not one penny more, and it says from any other source, which pretty inclusive.
Yes, Dave.
I believe that the board asked, the Board of Finance requested from the Board of Education, or intended to, at the very least. I know we discussed it back in So, since they've already got a legal opinion, it would seem to me that if they could share that with us, that might answer these questions.
Yeah, it would be nice to see it in writing.
Yeah, we have asked for that. So rather than have this debate over and over again, let's just have a look at their legal opinion. Can we do that? Do we need to make a formal request, a motion, or?
Well, actually, the one who faces the liability on this? The Board of Education, correct?
Yeah. And technically, all that happens is they don't get the funds from the town.
Right.
But I mean, if they have an opinion, share it with us, so we put this whole thing to bed.
You got one in writing?
We do, I will forward it to you.
Thank you.
Okay, good.
Not a
Like I
problem.
said, we'll put this whole thing to bed and be done with it.
Yep. Okay. Anything else on the projection, budget projections? Okay, now we'll move on to the next one. Next one is something we do not have as a policy yet, but should go into the book. On individual members of the Board of Finance having direct communication with town officials, outside consultants, attorneys, etc. This is something that's kind of bothered me for a while, and I think you brought that up. You wanted it on the agenda. Do you want to explain why you wanted it on the agenda?
Well, it seems like, I mean, we should have agreed that we have some policy procedure how we operate, and that, I mean, certainly the chair should be authorized to reach out for us. If we have subcommittees that we've appointed and chairman of subcommittees, then that person should be authorized. But I don't know whether, and I think it's open for discussion, whether it makes sense for every member to be able to speak for the board to different consultants, attorneys, whoever it is. I mean, it would seem like it should funnel back through our chairperson that we've elected. That's my thinking. I think we need to just discuss it and clarify it.
You just said speak on behalf.
Or to,
Well,
To inquire, sorry.
well, that's part of the problem as well. In my opinion, that it should all go through the chair, and the chair should take and determine who gets requested to provide the information. If it's something that has to do with general government, it's best to take and contact the first selectman and let him figure out who is the best person to answer that, such as the insurance, okay? Who handles the insurance for the town? You can't just call Donna and say, hey, Donna, can you, who does this, who does that? And ask her to take and provide information that she is not her job to provide. And it's by the same token, it would be the same thing with the Board of Education, but getting to either the superintendent or the chairman of the board and let them determine who would be the best person to take and dig out the information. Because if there's something to do with the maintenance of the school, you would not necessarily ask for Karen to take and get you the information, because she doesn't do that. Okay, you'd want to get a hold of Brian Musamichi, because he's the person in charge of that, but you should go through the head person. That way they stay in the loop. And it also relieves a lot of the pressure on certain individuals who have been contacted to provide information when it's really not their job.
Let's put it right on the table here. The person that we're talking about is me, because I am always asking questions and making comments. I got two problems. Number one, I gave up no rights as a citizen of Woodstock when I sat on this board. Number two, the reason I was put on this board and elected to this board is because I was put here to ask questions. Now, if I want to call up Donna and ask her a question, I can do that. You can make a policy for anything you'd like. I can still do that. And the thing that everybody here needs to realize is most of the stuff that was uncovered, whether it was the stipends or the air conditioning system or any number of other things, were found out because I happened to ask somebody a question. And sometimes you ask a question you get an answer. That leads to another question. That leads to yet another question. And that's how you find out things. Now, tonight's a good example of the problems with trying to direct all the questions through one person. You know, we had an inquiry of the Board of Education as to the ACA and the stipends for the town hall. The question that got asked was the wrong question. We happened to luck out that Dan Hebert answered the question that was supposed to be answered, not just the one that asked. This happens all the time. If we're gonna have to direct every question through one party, we will never find out anything, which is what some people would like. That's not gonna happen.
That's not what I had in mind. What I had in mind is you ask questions. If you have a question dealing for special education, for instance,
Yeah.
okay, you should get the information from the Director of Special Education.
It's a good example,
Okay,
because I got
and-
information
and
on
the thing-
special
and the
education
thing
just last
is-
month, and I didn't get it from her, I got it from Karen. And it was important to get it from Karen, because the information that I was looking at happened to be financial information. You know, to say I can't ask Karen for the check, for the non-payroll check register, without going through you, or whoever else you'd like to designate, is totally ridiculous, because I can do that as a citizen. Never mind the fact that I'm sitting on
There's
this
certain
floor.
things you can get just by punching in the computer, but there's other stuff you can't get by just punching in the computer, that you have to do research on. Then that's why I say it should go to the person who is in charge of that type of thing.
I do the research. When I walked into Donna's office about a year ago, and it just happened, it was actually about 11 months ago, and asked, hey, how many people are we insuring for $300,000? Because I had no clue. I mean, that was a perfectly simple question. Took her like, actually it might have been Karen, I don't remember which one of you answered. It took her like 3 seconds. I just happened to walk in there and I asked the question. And she said, yeah, we got 15. 8 of them take the insurance and 7 take the stipend. Oh, the stipend? What's the stipend? That's how that stuff happens. If you want to choreograph that, none of that ever happens.
So you couldn't have asked the chair to contact somebody on your behalf?
I happen to be standing in the treasurer's office. I said, there's $300,000 in the budget. How many people are we insuring?
Well,
That's about as innocent a question as they can be. Preston Schultz could walk in there and ask the same question.
Right, but he.
Or Ernie.
Right, but he
Or
asked,
anybody.
but he asked it as a citizen, as well he should be able to. You're not asking it as just a regular citizen anymore, Mr. Richardson, you're asking it as a member of the Board of Finance, and that's the difference. I don't really have a problem with you asking a lot of these questions, but I would feel better if you were asking them because we have said, yep, you are the chairman of this committee, and we want you to go out and find this information. But that's not what's happening. You're asking.
I ask questions.
You just are asking questions, but you're asking them for us.
I'm not asking
Yes,
them
you
to-
are.
I'm
As
asking
a
them.
Board of Finance member, Mr. Richardson, when you go in and ask the question, whoever it is you ask isn't answering just a citizen, they're answering you as a member of the Board of Finance, and that's the difference.
Well, I'm sorry that you feel that way, but I have the right to go in and ask those
As a
questions.
citizen, but
And
not as
it's
a
for
Board of
my
Finance member.
information. If I find out something, which gets us to the next issue on the agenda, if I find out something that is, I think is important or of interest, I disseminate that information, which you also seem to have a problem with.
I don't have a problem with you disseminating it. It's when it starts to become a conversation and we start to consider it, and that's what was happening.
That's not what happened.
It is what happened.
What happened
Excuse me,
was, I had
Mr.
a
Richardson, excuse me.
conversation with the auditor, and I informed, I copied everyone about my conversation with the town auditor. Why did I have the conversation with the town auditor? Because when we sat in here and had the review, at the end of the review, she stood there and said, if you have any questions, give me a call. I had a question. I gave her a call. The Board of Finance didn't give her a call. I gave her a call. I learned some information, which I thought was important. So I wrote it up and I disseminated the information. There was nothing in there about setting up a deliberation about what I wrote.
Well, if I happen to disseminate some different information, I'm not saying I did, but if I then disseminate something in response to you, now we're having a conversation, everybody's involved, it's a quorum, is that an illegal meeting, is it subject to FOI requests?
It could be, and I always copy Donna, and by copying Donna, it ends up going into the email system, which is searchable.
Hers is, mine isn't.
That's why I always copy Donna. You'll notice in the email when I responded to the earlier issues, I said, I always copy Donna.
But, Mr. Richardson, as soon as you send out something, and I'm not arguing that you asked a question, the representative told us to ask, that's fine, you sent the information out. But as soon as one of us responds to it, it comments, Mr. Braddock did, Mr. Kelleher did, as soon as they do, now it's not just disseminating information. Now we're having a conversation. I don't want my personal email to be part of FOI because you're sending out information during the middle, between meetings. Wait, get that information, thank you for getting it, put it in the packet, we'll consider it when we get here. We don't need to have this information sent out so that we can all look at it and comment on it, or maybe say, you know what, we don't agree with you, Mr. Richardson. As soon as we do that, then we're having a conversation.
Then don't respond to it. But you would rather come to this meeting.
Don't send it.
Having
more important.
You want me not to send it? So you would rather come to this meeting with no clue what's going on.
Put it in the packet. Maybe we need to have more meetings more often.
We would very much like to have clues going on, and that's why you would contact, if I had an issue, I would contact the chair and say, could you please put this on the agenda and provide any background information that goes with it, and then we can discuss it at the meeting. And if we can't take action at one meeting, we table it to the next meeting. I mean,
And that's what
I think you're asking some very important questions, but I think we need to follow this procedure.
Yeah, I think it's the issue of procedure. I'm learning quite a bit, and I think the information that you have come up with and passed around is extremely valuable. I think the process would be, I'm gonna go back to Beza Union, it would either go to the secretary, and the secretary could send that information, much like the letters we get from Board of Ed, whatever, to everyone, and to the chair. And it's the chair's job to decide how the information that is presented to the board, either through the secretary directly, gets sent to the members. And if the chair or the secretary isn't sending out the stuff, then that's an issue that we can discuss.
I don't have a problem with that.
Keep up digging, because I find it valuable. It is the process that's gonna trigger the FOI and everything else that gives me, I don't want my email searchable.
Yeah, no, and you know better than probably anybody else sitting around this table, that for your personal email to become FOI-able or searchable requires somebody to get a court order and show cause, which is really tough to do. I mean, just ask the Congress what they tried to do to get Hillary Clinton's email. It's not easy to do.
It takes one person to do that.
Oh, yeah.
And then the town has to respond and look at your administrative website.
Do you have a question or comment?
Well, I have a lot of things I'm going to refrain, but I think that some of the stuff that I get CC'd on, I'm missing quite of the rest of it, because when I read the whole thing, there's parts missing. Like maybe you might have said something about FOI and that didn't come through my email, only the bottom part. So I guess if you really want to keep a full record of the conversation, then the whole thing should have come today, only the end game.
That's right.
And that's what I got, so to clear that. Second, I'd like to address the memo, because the memo came from the minutes that were taken, and then the memos were given to you guys before they went out at a meeting, and no one said anything. But tonight, it's being said that the memo was incorrect, that it went to the Board of Ed. So, the memo that Mr. Richardson.
No, the wrong question was asked,
But
that's all.
it came from the minutes that you guys approved, but you also had.
Oh, yeah.
So that should have been brought up before it went out, but it didn't. So tonight, to say that, it's a little late.
You're correct, it should have been corrected in the minutes, but
So I'm
it
taking
didn't
it
really
from what was
register
said in
until
the
I saw
minutes.
the answer, and it was the wrong question.
Well, then it should have been corrected.
Yeah.
So so in order for us to do things properly, then make sure the minutes are correct, then whatever is said, then we'll make sure that those are the memos that go out. That's all I have to say tonight.
One of the
you.
things that I want is, I would like to see is that everyone stays in the loop. If it's something that, deals with general government, we're trying to get information from, it should go to the first selectman's office, so he knows there's something that's coming up. And it's the same thing with Board of Education, that if we request information from them, it should go up through the board, through the superintendent and the chairman of the Board of Education. Keep everybody in the loop so that whenever we have a public meeting or whatever, nobody's caught flat-footed. And they'll have a rough idea what we're talking about, and be able to have some answers for possible questions. That's all I'm looking for. And the other thing too is, I'd like if people are bypassing and going to either Donna or Karen, please bear in mind that they're up their eyeballs in budget stuff right now and do not have a lot of extra time to do a lot of digging.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever asked them to do any digging. I might have walked in and asked them, how many people are being covered by insurance? I'm trying to think of something else I ever asked.
I'm just saying, try to think of the town hall employees and the Board of Ed employees as to what the effect is gonna be on their time schedules. Okay, any other,
I'm just waiting for just 1 second, Dave, sorry. So I think what we're saying is if somebody's going to disseminate information by email, that we all have to agree here that we're not gonna respond, then it needs to go through Don. And I really think that the right way to do it, my own personal opinion, to set a high bar, is we should just send it to Donna and she'll distribute it.
well,
And then
okay,
it certainly, we're talking about a turnaround here, Dave. It's not a lot of time to take something, receive it, and then forward it out.
well, then there's another thing too, that, Donna is not the secretary of the Board of Finance, okay? She is just to take and provide us some information dealing with, town finances. The reason, she has been tasked, so to speak, to do the things that she has been asked to do, is because it has, the previous treasurer at one time was the, recorder for the Board of Finance, okay? And she, over the years, took on more and more and more, which was not really in her job description. And now that Donna's taken over, we all assume that that's part of her job description, where it's not.
Well, I think we need.
That's why I say it's more of the job description of the selectman's office, some of this stuff.
Set up the path, that's what we need to do.
Well, you know, I mean, if there's two things that have a lot in common, it better be those two functions.
That's right, I'm not
And
saying, I'm not
we don't
saying,
have a full-time person who does anything.
that's right.
But if we send things through Donna, she's sort of like our connection to the town hall world. Anything that goes to her is tagged to the town. period, because everything she does is tagged to the town. So if it's not her, it's gotta be somebody who's got that tag. Otherwise, we will get in trouble.
Somebody in an official capacity.
Huh?
Somebody in an official capacity could receive the information formally. That's what needs to take place.
Is that okay with you, to be that person?
As long as it's not abused. And I think we're setting guidelines tonight, so that helps.
Yeah.
Okay, this is something we can hash out later on. We don't need to hash it out right now. And we've got, what, another meeting before we start getting the budgets presented to us?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I would suggest we take and table that to the next meeting. And the same thing with the email communication stuff. Get an opinion from our FOI person and meeting the town clerk on this. As far as the email communication back and forth, as far as legality and everything else.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Seeing how both of these issues are policy issues,
Yes,
I think that that's something that
the policy committee.
the policy committee could work on and come up with some possible suggestions or more,
Yep,
and forward that to the board as a whole.
That's
One
why-
one of them's already in my draft.
that's
Good
why I
deal.
say, that's why I say we take and table that one as well.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if FOI still does this, but in the past, they used to send one of their staff or attorney out to towns and do kind of lecture, procedures on FOI. I mean, the basics, FOI meetings and minutes and all that, we pretty much all cut down over the last 25 years that are around. But the whole electronic world is something new, and it may be in the interest of the town to see if they can still do that and have a open meeting where all boards and commissions and town hall employees could attend a session sometime. That FOI holds on it's more on the issue of electronic FOI
Yeah.
issue, which are more complex and evolving, and I haven't kept up with it since I'm no longer employees, I don't really care, employee of the states, I don't really care anymore. But that is an issue that, maybe the whole town of Woodstock
Needs to have.
commissions, boards, and employees could have.
If I remember correctly, was it the previous election, the first meeting after the previous election, we had Judy Wahlberg and here talking about all of this stuff? Yeah, okay.
Well,
So
Tom-
we
Tom
can do the
Hennig-
same thing.
Tom Hennig, and he's part of that commission. In fact, he's the first person I called when this issue came up a couple of weeks ago. And he does go around. In fact, Woody, you were didn't you go to one of his sessions, FOIA session? He goes around and does.
Yeah, I don't know if they used to do it frequently, I don't know if this, but I'm sure they must have somebody. And we can kind of concentrate basically on the electronic world as opposed to the basics, we're all pretty familiar with.
Okay.
Just a suggestion.
Yep.
It's a good,
Good suggestion, yes.
Could I ask, maybe Mr. Schmer would like to join our policy committee?
No, I didn't go that far,
would you be interested in that?
No, I got too many.
Oh, come on.
If you do that, you gotta start having regular meetings and you gotta keep minutes. There's just the two of you, you don't.
That's right.
So be careful.
Let's just remember that just because something's FOIable doesn't mean it's wrong or illegal.
That's right.
So before we get all tangled up and every time we go near that acronym, we get scared, there's no reason for that. There are certain common sense things that need to be done, which is simply to say, don't respond. And I think that's what the Board of Education does, isn't it? Didn't your attorney tell you,
We get trained every 2 years.
yeah, what did they tell you about email communication?
We just had a meeting last Thursday, and we have Ann Littlefield, our Board of Ed attorneys, say that you're emailing each other and you're responding, that's illegal.
Yeah,
That's
responding.
an illegal meeting. Yeah, responding, but I'm hearing that you're responding with each other. So you have a quorum and you're having an illegal meeting.
Right, if it's a quorum of members responding back and forth.
I did ask that question,
Right.
and I did ask, I was curious, I said, how about other boards throughout the town? She said, any board,
Right.
any elected board.
So as soon as you get a quorum of responses,
Respond.
that's the trigger.
Even emailing, because I did ask the question also, all emails should go either to the chairman and then to like myself. People should email me and then I would forward to Victor. I would be the spokesperson for the Board of Ed. That's how she put it to me.
But it is questionable if you send something out to the entire Board of Finance, whether that constitutes a quorum if you start getting responses, right?
When you get the responses, when you get the.
No, but even if your responses don't equal a quorum, you've thrown it out to the full group, just as if you did here.
Right.
Not everybody answers when you're in a meeting.
Right.
So it's questionable, it just opens up the question. That's why we never respond.
Right.
When I called Tom Hennick, he has a very, very simple guideline for it. He says, this is what we tell people.
Don't do it.
He says, if it's dissemination, it's okay. If it's deliberation, it's not okay.
Exactly.
And that's the whole policy.
Okay, anything else? Citizen participation. Citizens want to take and make their comments. Go ahead.
I'd rather not hear, I sit at almost every Board of Finance meeting, and I'd rather not hear this petty stuff that went on tonight. And it's gonna be on film and everything else. We don't need this petty stuff. If a man wants to do his job, any one of you, that's fine with me. It educates me with everything. And I'd like to hear from all of you. And I don't care to knock down or stop anybody from speaking. I don't think that's right. I don't know what's going on here. Are we going communist or what? So I would rather see all of you. Stop this petty stuff between all of you.
Anybody else? Yes, Preston.
I'm just curious why you people of the Board of Finance don't have an address that says you're on the Board of Finance.
What I was just about to say, can't you
Yeah,
get it down to Woodstock?
Yeah, I don't understand why all your communications aren't on the server in this building. In fact, every elected official. You know, you're like Hillary Clinton, who use your own private email. I don't get it. You should have your own email address, your elected officials, it should be on the server. Then it's FOIable and you don't get your personal one messed up in it.
Any other comments? Yes.
I would just urge, I would urge all of the members who are in receipt of this one-way correspondence to keep in mind that just because someone's sending this out to you doesn't make it true. And insurance is a very complicated thing. So no disrespect to Mr. Richardson, but sometimes he gets it right about a third of the way, and then he loses that. And he thinks he's right, and I know he never wants to hear that he's not, but I urge you all to read the things that you have already asked for and received. You asked for an opinion from the town attorney, you got it. You asked for an opinion from the town's insurance consultant, you got it. You received an opinion from both insurance consultants. Please read these things. It's said 100 times now, this is not illegal. We're wasting a ton of money asking the same questions to the same people because one or two people do not want to accept that this is actually a dead end. There's things that need to be done. There's work that needs to be done. There's more important business than beating this horse to death on the side of the road. Please read your material. Insurance is complicated. If you want the insurance consultants to come in and have you understand the difference between self-insured and fully insured and a group that's less than 50 and the ACA and all these topics, they're complicated. And insurance is a constantly changing field right now because of ACA. So it's not surprising that it's confusing. But please ask questions and please listen to the answers that you get and stop listening to the viewpoint of one person who's actually come to several very, very wrong conclusions. It's wasting a lot of time and money, and it's very frustrating for those of us who do this for a living. All the people, the experts that you've asked, do this for a living. Trust their answers, for goodness sakes.
I guess a comment to that is, I don't understand how, we have an ethics statement around here, how the person that negotiates the contract benefits from it. That's number one. Number two, you can see the contract says for a individual. It doesn't say for a group. So the contract that is under, with the government employees union here, says a individual, and they give a group back. So there's a couple problems here. And I'm gonna keep talking about it until NBC shows up here and answers the first selectman a question. This is bad. When the first selectman benefits by $18,000 a year, how he raises his salary. You know, we're not talking about chump change. There's 80 people that work at the Board of Education that make less than you give as a stipend. So tell me about the ethics of this situation. Why didn't he recuse himself? Why didn't he at least not take it? And you know what? This whole question has dogged him for lots of months, and he hasn't answered. I have to go get the information in terms of compensation to see that he's taken it. So you answer the question, where's the ethics around here? Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes.
Just, and it's more, when Mr. Richardson was talking about the, and not to try to go through all the numbers, but I think the one thing, when you were adding, Mr. Richardson, the monthly contribution that the employees who are paying, and you were adding that on to what the associate's getting, the one thing that I don't think you were netting out against it was sort of the benefit of the insurance, which is not taxable, but they do get that benefit that they would otherwise be paying. So I'm not sure that it's the 11, I didn't have my pen with me, so I was trying to do off the top of it. The 1143 plus the 240 or 400. I think you have to kind of net out whether you want to call it a full insurance benefit versus, because I think that's what the town employees get, right? It's full insurance, they're not self-insured. But there is the value, they're only paying the 2,400 using that one, the 2,900 using that one example. But they're getting, say, a benefit of, let's say it's $10,000, they're getting a benefit of $7,100. So I don't think it's on top of it. I think you have to net.
Actually, it is, Mark, the way the IRS looks at it, and it's laid out here in Dan Hebert's letter, is they're looking at the cost to the employee who's getting the benefit. Well, the benefit is the insurance. Well, the cost to the employee is the $200 or $140 that they pay.
Yep.
But it's also the lost benefit of not getting the cash opt out.
But see, if they that's, but that's like, I guess I disagree only because if you're getting a benefit and you're not getting taxed on it. So take aside the dollar amount of subsidies, I'm not trying to argue that. But if you get 10
but that's not what their issue is. Their issue is that for the employee who buys the insurance, in effect, they lose out on what the stipend would be if they didn't take the insurance. And they have to pay $240. So therefore, what they are paying for that insurance is the $240 and the lost benefit.
Well, I won't take the board's time, but we'll
It's
agree
the
to disagree on
IRS's approach. That's what surprised me. I didn't even realize this till like 2 o'clock this afternoon, when I read this for about the third time, and suddenly the light went on. And then when I looked it up, this is in fact what the whole issue is, and they give example after example. And it's real, because, Fred and I are 2 employees, and we have the same job, and he makes 40 grand, I make 40 grand. And he has a wife who provides him with health insurance, so he gets the stipend. He gets paid $56,000. I still get 40 grand.
Plus your insurance.
Plus my insurance. So my insurance cost me $16,000. That's what the IRS's approach to this thing is.
Well, but I guess you say, but I'm saying you say 10. I guess that's where I was saying.
It's still the allowable
Well, in 3
If
years,
I'm
when we
making
tax
40 grand,
health insurance, it won't matter for you.
if I'm making 40 grand, the most that I can be expected to spend, to pay is $3,800. That's where the problem comes in. And that's why the Board of Education was in fine shape. Because their stipends are small enough so that when they're incremented on top of their copays, they don't trip the limit.
I'm not sure, I mean, I dealt with this at my company, and I'm not sure I agree that's how the Cadillac tax is. It's based on the.
It's
total
not a
value.
Cadillac. I had the same problem you're having and that Roy had. The problem isn't the people who get the money. The problem is the people who don't get the money. Until I read Dan Hendrick's thing, I kept looking at this thing, I kept trying to figure out where the stipend itself was running into conflict with the ACA. It doesn't. ACA could care less.
Yeah.
Where the conflict comes in is what they're perceiving as lost income for the person who does get the insurance. It's pretty straight. I can send you a copy of this.
No, I'm well familiar with it. I mean, I did it for.
I don't think you're familiar with this part, because this part just came out. That's why Dan,
Yeah.
I mean, he does a big favor by telling us about this. Frankly, I could have looked at this for 100 years, and I would have never looked at it from that angle.
Any other comments? Okay, I have no correspondence or announcements.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
All in favor? We are adjourned.